Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Magnetic Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Mintzloff, and today I'm super excited. I have a good friend of mine, founder, CEO at Swapt, Andrew Smith. Andrew, first of all, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jared. Excited to be on.
So for the audience that doesn't know who you are, Andrew, and what you do, would love to just, if you could give us some background on how you got here and then a little bit about Swapt, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So, computer engineer by trade, went to Oracle and then Klaviyo as an early engineer, sales engineer, and ended up leaving with an investment from the CEO and other people around the company last year to help you identify your customers in the offline space. Essentially, the whole business gap that I found when I was a solution architect over at Klaviyo is that businesses had no idea who their customers are when they spend money out of home or in retail. And what was happening is you'd have all these people coming in, they'd see your, uh, brand marketing, etc., for awareness, but there was no way of really determining ROI or driving revenue from that. And if you had a QR code, and that's a big if, then you'd mainly go to your website. So what we started doing is when I was actually at Klaviyo testing with some clients, let's drive into a website with pop-up form, let's do this. And the conversion rates on these things were maximum like 0.01%, something crazy small like that. And what I ended up doing is figuring out how to actually add rewards directly from the QR code. So enter in promo codes into our platform and then text them out or uh, provision $5 in someone's Apple Wallet. And we saw conversion rates of upwards of 80% for the majority of our clients. So essentially that helps you understand what ROI was actually driven from each out of home marketing or store and understand like what customers do live in the wild.
Yeah. So so it sounds like some of this came from, and also for context too, for listeners, I worked with Andrew at Klaviyo, so I got to know him really well. Um, how did this come about? I know you mentioned it started from kind of like people having a lot of experiences that were happening and they didn't have a way to track. But what gave you sort of this idea that, hey, QR codes are how we do it? And what is unique about your technology, I guess, that businesses today can't really leverage or aren't leveraging really well?
Yeah, so funny enough, last year when I first came up with the idea, the first client that came up to Swapt actually as a potential prospect was Alicia Keys, and sort of ran by with her, hey, what if I showed her like this app and said people, or her team, this app, and said, basically you download the app and then we know where you are and who you are and if you came to a concert, and you can offer promotional content when you scan. And sort of the feedback was that's just not doable. She has her own app, stuff like that. And then the second thought was, okay, then you have your marketing materials or whatever promotion in the concert, and that actually got a pass. So we ended up not working directly with her and her team yet, but have since rolled out with multiple artists like Miguel, Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, and more. Yeah.
And what is unique around, because for myself, right, when I think of QR codes, I think of scan and get access to something on site. You guys are using QR codes as a conversion point. Can you talk a little bit about like where you kind of come in and fill that missing piece in brand strategy today?
Yeah. So, of course, you can already create for a lot of D2C brands. You know that the biggest number one thing you do is create acquisition channels through like pop-up forms probably and drive ads to those. But the issue with that with QR codes is that you're driving people to your website where I'm on my phone, I'm automatically conditioned to like exit out of whatever pop-up form is out there. And secondly, I'm also not conditioned like I am on the couch to read through your materials and eventually make a purchase. If I'm on the go and I see an advertisement like QR code, I am going to scan it maybe, like probably not, but if I do scan it, I'm definitely not reading your site. So the abandonment rates are very, very, very high for anything that happens there, like I mentioned before. And if you just offer like slam in someone's face an optimized conversion page for on the go shoppers and really give them like that reward that slams in their face and give them spin the wheel, like do something kind of fun, then your conversion rates are going to be super high.
And you guys also help with understanding like who are the people that are actually scanning these things, right, as well.
Yeah, first party data help you understand exactly where, who, what they were interested in, give you that metadata and extra information as well.
Cool. So here's what I'm really interested in learning about. So this podcast, right, we're all about magnetic in terms of brands that are attractive to, they have a really passionate consumer base. I think it's really interesting because I'm sure you work with some brands that are extremely magnetic. I know you mentioned when we were talking the other day, you guys worked with a few of those brands. I'd love to hear about any sort of applications that you guys have helped enable where they've done sort of these activations, right? And they've had a ton of success with conversion with these QR codes. Can you tell us, maybe some stories around successful implementations of some of these activations that you guys have done?
Yeah, sure. So one big success story was with DoorDash actually. So they came to us, a smaller branch of their team came to us back in February, and they said basically their college program was dwindling down, probably going to be discontinued by next year. And the people that we were talking to were running, they tried it last year. They were going to do it this, the winter semester already started with 5 schools and it just really wasn't working. They said, how do we make this thing work? So we ended up diving into it with them, and this is how we developed a solution with DoorDash to give you $10 directly in the app when you scan. And what ended up happening is that they started throwing those all around campus, and we made rules so you can't like collect more than one if your phone is different, etc.
Hmm.
So we threw them all around campus. We put them in apartment buildings around the five, and we were able to drive a ton of money in incremental revenue that's directly related to the college program. And long story short, they're 40xing that program next year, and they ended up getting uh, they ended up just killing it. So a lot of good customer growth from them, and really good application of, hey, if you don't know what's working and if something isn't driving new customers, then here's a way through Swap to actually drive that customer at a cheaper and faster rate.
Yeah, I love that. Also, too, it's kind of reminds me of because you how many of these signs did you guys put out? Were they just like spread throughout campuses, or what was sort of the strategy around
Yeah.
where to put them?
Yeah, so spread throughout campuses, apartments, brand ambassadors, things of that nature. And one of the cool things about Swap 2 is you can really quickly test different campaigns. So for them, they'd have one campaign running that was $10 off, one campaign running that was just a few months free of Dash Pass. And then once they found out that the $10 off drop off was actually um, just like basically a $10 was creating customers that weren't as valuable as just the free months free of Dash Pass were. So they just canceled the $10 one. They enacted the 3 months of Dash Pass, and then like it was a one button solution to change all their QR codes to the content that worked best for them.
Yeah, so there's an element of sort of trial and error, A/B testing that you guys did in real life as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's super important for brands and something that is very unique to Swaps as well, because a lot of the times, especially since the QR marketing, off out of home marketing space that is driven through QR codes is fairly new. I think late 2020 was the first time it was ever adopted because QR codes were then scannable by phones, and COVID kind of comboed to create this value prop for potentially for brands. And now we're at this place where you can scan these QR codes, everyone knows how to do it, but nobody has a reason to. So what happens when you give them that reason, and does it provide value? And
Mm.
the answer is people will scan and it does provide value. And right now we're typically just catered around Gen Z. So anyone with a Gen Z audience that wants to connect to your Gen Z customers in a better way or grow your college Gen Z base, uh, we can help you very rapidly expand into colleges and Gen Z portfolios with our strategies now.
I feel like one of the challenges that you probably see, because for me personally, I hate QR codes. When I go to a restaurant, I miss the old days of menus. Um, COVID hit, and then all of a sudden menus were gone, which is probably like a sustainable practice. But I just like the feeling of like feeling stuff, touching things.
Yeah.
So for someone like me who is just anti QR codes, Is there any like unique or like fun strategies that any of your brands have employed that aren't just sort of like, hey, claim for a discount or claim for money? Is there anything that you've tried that's a little bit different that might incentivize people like me who just normally wouldn't engage with QR codes?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I am big into just like paper menus at restaurants. I really don't like the QR codes either. I think like that story is really interesting because people just assume, oh, you have a QR code company, so people are going to be more interested. You're going to be really interested in scanning QR code. Like that's not necessarily true. In fact, the reason that I'm not a big QR code scanner, I think, is a more impactful thing for my business because if I will scan a QR code, it must be for something
Yeah.
special. Like give me money out of this or give me something because we found that yeah it's a forcing function, like you have to scan this QR code to get this free thing at an event, or you have to scan this QR code to get the menu. It's just like why?
Hmm.
But if it really excites customers, like it's like, hey, you scan here and you get this, then um, it's a lot more effective. And we found that people will actually take out their phone to scan if you get $10 from DoorDash. So yeah, a unique thing that we've done for clients before is sort of like custom games, which has been pretty fun. Like we had another podcast that hosted an event, and they did this custom game where everyone there just played this race against the podcast hosts. Different different fun games that we've implemented are like spin the wheels and um, quizzes too. So just any sort of quick hit that gets people really excited. That's what we've been trying to do.
I feel like with QR codes, I get the sense that like they feel a lot similar to banner ads sometimes, where if I'm shopping and I can clearly define when a banner ad hits me. And we had a guest on
Yeah,
here, Marissa, who was an absolute, she was a machine at kind of like finding a way to integrate ads into the experience online. So it wasn't like you couldn't easily identify it. You were kind of shopping and then it was like, wait, is this like a recommended video? It felt native, it felt natural, and they were able to crush it because they were able to build these activations for like, I mean, they're not activations, but they were able to build these sort of touch points in much more naturally to your digital experience. I wonder how
yeah,
much of that, taking that lens, right? What does that look like in the physical world where I'm shopping, right? And I see a QR code. My mind goes banner ad, right? I think that's really interesting to me is like, how
yeah.
do you make these activation points more experiential and feel more native to the shopping experience or to the, event experience, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So I think that one would be going back to sort of the initial value prop, like not overcomplicating it. It's you're walking on the street, you see a banner ad, and guess what? You're probably not going to scan it if you see some sort of like sign for something. But if you do, then like if you are the person that's going to scan that, then you're probably going to be a very good targeted customer for that brand.
Hmm.
So they should definitely record that information from you. And if they can encourage more people to scan with like some sort of promotion, great. And if they can understand their targeted clientele by having a more generic, just like you said, a banner ad, but if they scan it, you really know that they're interested, that's also impactful. I don't think that the problem here is solved by, yeah, making that more conducive to a shopping experience. So if you're in the store and having someone scan for more information or scan a discounts is also impactful. Like, uh, but it's also just again the promotional aspect of it. But in general, if you think about going into a store, I think recent study was 40% of people don't even want to go to the register at all at a store anymore. Like they want zero interaction with zero people when they're shopping. And I think that's what we're seeing in the retail world, where more and more people year after year want nothing to do with your sales clerks or your associates. And what's going to start happening is you're still going to have to find a way of providing them value. And right now, there's no way of entering them into a loyalty program or any way of getting them really engaged with your brand. But if there was an easier way to do that through some sort of like engaging QR code without talking to any staff members, that's going to have a much higher conversion rate, is what we're finding already through some of our retailers. than having them talk to the staff and like figure out that sort of shopping, because that's not really where the world's headed right now.
Yeah, I sympathize with people. I mean, that's sort of me when I go to, as I've gotten older, I think I've gotten more anti, engaging with people at stores. I don't know if that's just a product of me being in a software company or running a software company. Um, but I feel like that's me where I go into the store and if someone comes up to me, I'm never the person that's like, I need help. If anything, I'm like researching on my own while I'm at the store and maybe like checking out a brand and looking it up on for like reviews, making sure like, hey, is this thing going to tear apart in 2 days? I almost feel like too with your technology, getting back to like my original point of making it immersive, maybe there's ways where you can have a QR system where I can scan next to an item and I can see like more information about it, or maybe I can get some reviews that pull up of like what people have said or like sizing instructions. Obviously you can try it on, but I feel like that is really interesting to me because I'm someone that does like to research, that does like to know more about like how the cookie was made. But I don't necessarily want to ask the front desk person either. So I'm curious, like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we actually recently did come out with a catalog feature, and that one's been really interesting for brands. So you could scan and then select what items in your catalog that you're interested in, and if you have like some new arrival section or a specific collection in your store, you could put the QR code around that with specific items that were around that, and you could basically either give information about those items or have them select which ones they're interested in, sort of a carousel motion to get more information directly on the page as well as emailed with the discount. And the thought is that a lot of the times when you're shopping, if you're that interested and engaged in like an informational shopper, you probably won't purchase on the spot either.
Hmm.
There's there's little to no incentive, and Swap's trying to solve for that, so heighten acquisition rates in store, but also heighten your relationship with the customer in general. This person's an omni-channel shopper. They're historically going to spend 33% more in your brand. So let's make sure to capture their data when we give them that information and give you a really overall omni-channel experience when you're shopping.
Is there a brand you can think of? You don't necessarily have to have worked with them that does a really good job that you can kind of paint a picture with of how, because one of the things that I talk to brands all the time is they want to be more omni-channel. They want to have more in person and they want to be more personalized first. But they want to be able to have personalized experiences that move beyond just the storefront, like online. Because we work with a lot of e-commerce brands and that's a challenge where when you're online, you can drop a cookie, you can see what they're looking at, you can pixel track them. When you're in the store, it's extremely difficult. So I'm curious, is there a brand you can think of that's like doing a really good job at sort of providing personalized experiences across all their channels, including, the retail location as well?
Yeah. One of our brands, Filson, actually, is starting to crush it with that. They're doing a really good job of engaging like their omni-channel customer, understanding exactly who comes to the stores when, and then giving them the information that they need afterwards. So definitely one of our best customers and one of my favorites to work with, just because they're so leading edge in terms of getting their customers to have a fully immersive omni-channel experience. And that's a big pinnacle for them. We have some really exciting things in the works with them for January, actually. So, gonna be a fun release near the end of January about what we're up to with them. But yeah, I think the really sophisticated brands right now are trying to figure that out, exactly what we're mentioning. And since we're on the leading edge of that with some of our clients, we're definitely seeing those those customers. One that I think does a really good job as well, that we're not a customer of they're not a customer of Swaps yet, is Zara. I think Zara just has the intuitive drive to capture these omni-channel customers. It's one of my favorite clothing brands, so I know everything about walking into their store, and they do a really good job of when I'm at the register, make sure to capture this information, make sure to give me incentive good enough before I purchase to scan the QR code and enter my data.
I'm wearing Zara right now, so I definitely can agree with you. Zara is great. I feel like Zara though, I don't know that they do a great job at tying in the online at all because now I could be wrong, but I don't really understand how their online store sometimes connects with their in-store because everything's so different. I feel like every time I go to a Zara, it's like almost a completely unique experience because they have so much different stuff, especially when I'm in Europe. It almost feels like it's a different store. And then I go online and it's like I can't find anything that I like originally was trying on because it's the naming conventions are crazy. So I feel like with them,
That's a good point.
it's an amazing experience, but at the same time, like I get scared going online because I have no idea how that like in-store to online, it's not super seamless across every one of these retail locations. And maybe that's part of their strategy is making it different. So every time you're in a new city, I do tend to go to Zara because I'm like, hey, Miami Zara, mate, it's probably going to be totally different than the one in New York. So who knows? Maybe I'll have
I
to
do
get
the same
Zara on
thing
here.
actually. Yeah, I do the same thing. Actually, you're right. It's kind of like Zara has the opposite problem that a
Yeah.
lot of like D2C e-commerce with retail brands have today, which is highly sophisticated offline. And yes, they have the data capture points and know how to make people convert offline, but they might not have the same level of sophistication online, or they do, and that's sort of their strategy, which is very unique to them, probably not replicable.
Yeah, and maybe that's a part of it too, right? Like I think it'd be interesting to talk to them about how they kind of create that uniqueness at each storefront, and it's almost an advantage. So it's like there's
Yeah,
probably a line between make your experience the same across every channel you have with the brand. Like that sounds good in practice, but maybe there's a balance of like make your stores have a unique element. Obviously, the tone, the voice, the experiential like side of it maybe is the same. Maybe there's like a balance there. I'm not sure what that would look like, but I'm curious how Zara handles it because I think that Zara, the fact that they make me want to go to a store every time I'm in a new city because I know it's unique in the sense of like their product offering. That's got to be a part of
yeah.
their strategy, I would assume, unless it's just an accident.
I, I agree with you. Like every single time I go to a new city, I'm like, where like gotta stop at a Zara.
Yeah,
So it probably is.
yeah.
I can't imagine they
Yeah, because
do
if you
that
knew
by
you could get
accident.
it online, right, then why go in maybe? Um, okay, so
Yeah,
transitioning from that, thinking about this sort of like shift because you were at Klaviyo during COVID, you saw sort of this digital transformation, or there's been many digital transformations, but you saw digital transformation COVID wave where
yeah,
brands that were in store were like, how do we figure out online? And now what I think you're seeing is there's a bunch of things, but now brands are figuring out, now brands are realizing everyone's online, everybody has a cool website, everybody has a cool story, everybody has a cool product. Now it's like, well, how do I differentiate? And a lot of those brands are differentiating through the in-person stuff again, through the because it's like a cyclical, there's sort of a cyclical nature to it. When everybody moves
yeah.
online, you move in store. When everybody's in store, you move online. How do you feel about do you notice that like transition coming back to the in-store experiences? Yeah, I'm curious just to get your thoughts on that because that's sort of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing for brands today, like you hit it right on the hammer on the nail there, is differentiated experiences. Because if I'm a brand and I'm doing the same thing everyone else is right now, the economy and the grander macro is just not prone to treating that brand nicely. It's you're not going to just get sales out of nowhere anymore. Nobody has these COVID checks lying around that they're willing to spend on your e-commerce site. So if you don't have some sort of differentiator, then you're not winning. So brands that are doing the best have both. You either and also they know how to leverage that. So I keep going back to DoorDash, but it's just because of how much they're killing it. They have the sophistication of here's this online channel that understands one-to-one customer association, and they can also relate that to their offline channels and use Swapt to meta tag uh, to tag their metadata to understand exactly what it is about that customer that they're interested in, and then how to make them, spend more with our simple A/B testing. So definitely a lot of value that I see there in terms of differentiation, understanding your customers more, and then putting that into action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I keep coming back to this. sort of cyclical in nature, but as everything's moved online, right, with COVID especially, I feel like people today, they live online, they live on their phones, and they don't have a single second of, allowing their brain to kind of like turn off for a second or to perceive what's happening. So we live in a world where it's a very immediate gratification, swipe instantly. And when you look at that lens from a brand perspective, if you're trying to get their attention, is there any harder time in our history, I feel like, to get their attention than today? And so if you're going to try and get someone's attention, should you not look at the place where they're the most attentive? And they're not the most attentive on their phones, or they're not the most attentive online. In fact, they're probably the only time they take a second to breathe is when they're going to get their coffee in the morning. So I feel like there's a huge opportunity, especially with QR experiences, but meet the customer where they're the most attentive, which is when they're out in the world, when they're experiencing human connection. I think that there's a huge opportunity for that. And we've seen that with brands that run events. I was just at an event in Los Angeles literally yesterday, Sunday. Malbon had an event for all of their top fans to come in and golf and, shoot the shit and grab some food. And I feel like they got their attention
Yeah.
because they were there having a good time. They weren't on their phone swiping. So I feel like there's something there. I think brands can learn a lot from just going to where the customer is the most attentive. And right now the customer is certainly not the most attentive on their phone.
Yeah. Well, going back to your coffees in the morning, even, there's a really good differentiator that's super obvious. And I think it's probably one of the biggest, most obvious ones in the world right now in terms of really understanding your customer and seeing profits versus not understanding your customer. And that'd be Starbucks versus Dunkin'.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm Starbucks, I am not a franchisee first and foremost. And that business process, that that piece doesn't matter as much as it does still matter, but it doesn't matter as much in this context as it does really engaging your customer base. And Starbucks does a great job of understanding all of their data, and then because they understand all their data, the purchases online and offline, they're able to create this really powerful, really sophisticated database of every single person that purchases and understand exactly, okay, I'm going to send this person this reward because Andrew drinks chai tea lattes
Mm.
and he hasn't had one in 3 days. So I'm going to incentivize him with 300 points. Whereas Dunkin', where it's like you go and you shop at Dunkin' and you get your coffee and get out, they don't necessarily have a great customer database. And if they don't have any information on their customers, then it's going to be incredibly difficult to justify more spend. So for a Starbucks, for a DoorDash, I have some out of home advertisements. Then guess what? I understand, and I use QR code. Guess what? I'm able to understand that customer at an extremely granular level and A/B test. And the reason why that's super important is because if I'm Starbucks, I can have an out of home advertisement with a QR code with an incentive, and I can A/B test that throughout 8
Mm-hmm.
different regions of the world. So Ohio gets 10% off, 500 loyalty points to Massachusetts, and figure out in one day which incentive works best for our customers and doesn't take from our bottom line and increase revenue and increase customer acquisition costs as cheaply and as quickly as possible. Whereas if I'm Dunkin' and I don't have an understanding of my customers outside of the loyalty program, then it's going to be extremely difficult for me to make sophisticated business decisions that can really narrow down my bottom line and grow customers quickly. And that data point, that ability of understanding our customers to that big of an extent is what's going to make the winners and losers in the future. And we have already seen the losers fall one after one: Bed Bath and Beyond, Toys R Us, all the way back to Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm. So you think really it starts with like these brands that you're saying are successful in the future are the ones that really are able to harness their customer data, but more than that, tailor that customer data into curated experiences and offers that generate those actions that you're
Yeah,
talking
and
about.
they can give you those sort of offers and incentivize you to come back for more and give you more loyalty retention, as well as acquire new customers quicker than anybody else. And the only way you're going to be able to acquire customers quickly is if you understand how to acquire a customer. And there's no way you can understand how to acquire a customer if you don't have information on all this data.
Mm-hmm. What do you think in terms of offers, right? Because getting back to this before, but I'm really curious because this is something that brands struggle with a lot. And we live in a discount world, or we have in the past. Loyalty has been looked at as sort of a transactional sort of discount or points, some sort of incentive structure, right? So for myself, I'll just tell you anecdotally, and I can't speak to, because I'm sure that this isn't the case for a lot of people, but for me, a well timed, touch point that tells me, hey, I know who you are. Maybe it's my birthday, and they send me a really nice birthday note that mentions like my favorite drink. Like that would be, to me, a million times more motivating, or it's something that I get excited about than, hey, here's $10 off at Dunkin', just like a generic sort of offer. How do you feel about the incentive structures today? And I'm curious to hear like if you would agree with that, and how brands are doing at generating those sort of like tailored mechanisms for incentivizing
Yeah,
people.
yeah, that's a really good point. Like, how, if I was a brand, could I even begin to think of doing that right now if I don't have? Well, first and foremost, what you need to have is you have to have an understanding of your customer. So, continue getting that customer information, continue getting that data, and that's going to require different strategies. But once you have that data, how do you then put it into action? And I think having sophisticated loyalty programs is important, having an email, um, CRM, being able to understand your customers at that level is important. And I think you're right. Like, those personalized messages are what make or break brands, because that's going to give me, and that understanding of the data is, again, along with the acquisition cost, going to make or break a brand, because that's going to increase your LTV throughout the year. So you're going to
Hmm.
spend more. You're going to remember this brand. You're going to love this brand. Um, I think that's a no-brainer. I think brands that are looking to do that, though, from scratch, have a long ways ahead. And we've actually been working with some brands that are more newcomers to that world. So basically, add Apple Wallet points, make it really simple. You scan here, you add Apple Wallet points, you understand who this customer is, and the next time they come and shop, you can give them more points and show that directly in their Apple Wallet. Versus a more sophisticated
Mm.
customer with all that already enhanced, then what we do is we let you relay that to your customer a little more easily through Apple Wallet QR code. We can load different pages based off of what segment you're in the CRM when I scan, and different strategies around that to help you really personalize the shopper experience and anyone that visits you at a home experience. And I think and you can also even import, um, like, specific leads if you're only trying to target 100 people. And I think there's really a winning strategy, like you mentioned, like with that level of personalization. It's just, how do you do that if you're a brand that has nothing? And then what do you have to do? Like, there really
Hmm.
is no, I think brands could benefit from this, making me think, because there really is no guidebook to say, like, this is the different levels of sophistication you could be. And if you're level 1, how do you get to level 10? And if you're level 7, what are the things keeping you from being level 10? And what is a level 10?
Hmm. Yeah, and it probably looks a lot different depending on the brand too, right? So if you've got 6 retail locations and you do most of your business through wholesalers, right? Like that sophistication level might never reach the level of, Starbucks, who is able to really control and understand the customer. I
Yeah.
think really the value, though, I think for listeners on this podcast, right, is how do I go from 0 to 1, and how do I go from like 1 to 2? Because in my experience and at Klaviyo, you can probably, this probably resonates. Like I was selling Klaviyo, and I met with a lot of brands, a lot of times bigger brands too, who you'd think when you come in and you see these brands, I can think of, I think Little Tykes as an example, but big brands that have very big followings, and they don't necessarily have, they're not at like a 5 or 6. They're actually at like a 1 in terms of understanding their customers. And I think there's this misconception that if you're a big brand, you've figured out customer data. I think even big brands haven't figured it out. And what I've realized is it's not necessarily about like going from like 5 to 6 or 6 to 7. It's like, what's the few things that you can do super simply, super easily, that are going to move the needle in terms of customer data. That's like what brands should focus on, as opposed to what I feel like brands do is they think about the 7 to 8, 8 to 9 stuff all the time. And they're forgetting, like, wait, we don't even
Yeah.
have a simple QR activation at our store. Like, why are we thinking about tapping our wallet or our app, when you walk in and getting like Amazon like levels of personalization? Like, it's just like, well, how about you just start with QR code? Like, let people know that you're there and let them know that you're excited that they're shopping. I think that's the biggest challenge for brands is not getting happy ears, happy eyes about what's possible, and starting with like what's going to move the needle
Yeah.
tomorrow.
We've seen that brands can collect over 300 customers per day in store, and like new customers. And it's crazy because those same brands that aren't leveraging those kind of strategies just to collect in-store customers are spending millions of dollars on advertisements. And like you mentioned, like their own
Mm.
apps. And I don't care. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier. Like I was going to one of my favorite restaurants today, Greco in Boston. They do like great Mediterranean. And
Great
yeah, I love
restaurant.
it. Seaport. But I was thinking like they have this download app on the front of their store for $3. I'm like, I don't care how much money you're giving me. I'm not downloading your app. Like that level of
Mm-hmm.
sophistication, I don't know if they're there yet. Maybe they are, and they are trying to move on to this next level. But the fact is that very, very, very few people download more than a few apps a year. So if you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
focus on increasing your app downloads rather than increasing your personalization, then you should take a serious look at what are your priorities for the year and why.
Yeah, I think the fact that people swipe right at 2 second mark of a short form video, that could potentially be the most exciting video they've ever seen, shows you that they're not going to spend 25 seconds signing up for your app. Um, but I think brands are still learning that there is a disconnect right now between what brands envision is going to be successful and what actually is working when it comes to engaging users in the store and in the real world. Um, and I'm excited for what's possible, but I think right now it's just like what you said, like giving them these hard metrics of, hey, listen, love that you guys have an app, but you're missing out on potentially 200 people a day that you could then later nurture into the app, get them educated on it, get them excited about it. What's going to move someone from 0 to 1 instead of, trying to skip 2, 3,
Yeah.
and 4.
Can you guess what our drop off rate was on a few of our A/B tests for brands when you put a purchase button on and a link out button on a landing page form versus just subscribe button?
Subscribe versus a
They,
purchase
well, both
button.
have a subscription
Like
button,
what?
but if you put a purchase button above the
Okay.
subscription button, guess what the item name and product, whatever, guess what the drop off rate was?
I'm going to guess like over 90% of
Yeah,
people
it wasn't
drop
90%,
off.
but it was 70. It was over 70%
Oh,
of people will drop off. Yeah,
okay.
we were seeing like a 70 to 75% for a few A/B tests and conversion with email. And then what was happening is because we're connected with their Klaviyo account too, so we understand the pop-ups. And it's crazy because I will
Mm-hmm.
go to some customers, just show them their own websites, and I'll be like, okay, going on this website, and like go to your website right now, and they'll go to it and immediately click the X on the pop-up form. I was like, I was gonna have you subscribe on that pop-up form to show you the next step, but like the fact that you just clicked X really goes and proves why you can't just have a landing page that goes to a pop-up form on a QR code. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
conditioned as human beings to click X. What people need is they need a very simple CTA and a very simple reason to just click subscribe and nothing else on the page really. Like
Mm-hmm.
a very little amount. Just hi, we are this. Your reward is this. Click subscribe to redeem. Don't like overcomplicate it.
Yeah. I'm already thinking about just like the content today and how hard they have to try to keep your attention. Like I've seen videos where there's a video playing underneath that's like
You mean
visually
like the car
stimulating,
ones?
and then there's
Yeah,
yes, and
those are crazy.
it's so like for people listening, it's basically like the video's cut in half on your phone. The bottom half is just a video of like something extremely visually like engaging. It could be just a car continually falling down a hill or something, or somebody jumping on very small little blocks where it's like you don't know if they're going to fall off. while that's happening visually, you're getting like audio stimulation from like a story or a motivational quote, and your brain is just so stimulated that it's actually really effective. And sometimes I'll be watching those, and I will be like, "Wow, this is like they've mastered the art of not swiping because I'm locked, I'm hooked. I don't know why. I don't care about either of those things, but when you combine them, it blows my mind."
It's
So
crazy.
I'm almost wondering like what does that look like for brands, like when that's how much it takes for me not to swipe on content that isn't branded. what how do brands navigate that? That's just, it's a
Well,
daunting
that's why
task,
we are
essentially,
targeting
is what
Gen
I'm
Z
saying.
specifically. Like the attention span is so little, stuff like that, and we know how to convert them. And just like straight up confetti
Hmm.
or like fireworks on the page along with the offer, it's just like $5 confetti, like
Yeah.
that will, entice people. And it's super quick, super easy, and super exciting. Um, you don't want to have to go to like a form and then like, okay, I have option A and I have option B and I have option C and I can follow them on Instagram
Hmm.
and I can read more. It's like confetti, $5, bam,
Yeah.
conversion.
Boom,
Yep,
in your
that's easy
face.
money.
And there's like a balancing act too. It's like I feel like these days everybody's so mistrustful too of like inputting their data, that the offer has to be good but not too good to the point where people are like, wait, like, something's up here. There's no way they're making their money back on this offer. Or they're going to sell my data, or they're doing something fishy. I just feel like consumers are so apprehensive about giving you even something as simple as their email or 10 seconds of time, that balancing act of like, give them something that's valuable, but at the same time, it's hard because it's too valuable. I mean, for me personally, if I see something that looks too good to be true, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and that's
you
why
know
A/B testing is so important. That's what we always recommend for our brands.
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, there's an example. I'm reminded of Aloe Yoga did an activation where you could like claim a compliment, and I thought it was really interesting because I feel like in today's world, right, those sorts of offers are intriguing more so than I think something like, hey, claim 10% off your next purchase. Even though the value when you stack them up, like a compliment is worth
Yeah,
literally nothing, like in terms of monetary value, versus 10% off at Aloe Yoga. I mean, that's Aloe Yoga stuff is pretty pricey. But one of them is more so just trying to bring value to the customer in a new way, not just from a monetary perspective, but hey, I know who you are. I see you. You're someone that loves to be healthy, loves to be like focus on your wellness. And here's something that you can take with you that's going to make your day that much brighter. What an amazing idea. I really like that idea. I think more brands should get creative around
yeah,
how can we incentivize our customers in ways that aren't incentivized like financially. It's like incentivized via making your customers feel great, making their day easier.
yeah. And I think that's something actually I was really interested initially in the like NFT space because of it's like here's a way of giving your
Hmm.
customers something cool that they can take home with them without costing your brand anything. But I think the problem ultimately ended up
Yeah,
being it was like almost too good to be true. It was it was no cost. Yeah, it was
100%.
no cost for the brands, and you get to take something home that doesn't matter. And I think that the quick like happy dopamine rush. Um, I haven't actually tested that yet. I wonder if that would be as effective. Sounds sounds like a great way of doing it. It sounds like a too good to be true scenario though, because you as a brand lower your acquisition cost to basically zero, whatever it costs to get that in front of the person. And if you already own like the retail store, it's zero. Um, if that works, I'm definitely going to A/B test that now.
A/B test it. I mean, you said it. I think that's one of the takeaways I have too from this is just I think your technology is so great because the worst thing you can do is A/B test and then you pick the wrong one. So I think brands
Oh shoot, I think
need
I
to get more
dropped.
creative though. I think the whole theme of this podcast is magnetic, because I like the name magnetic because there's something about magnets. And for people that listen to the full form podcast, I've said this like I think before, but where you take two magnets and you push them together and they'll push apart if they're not kind of right for each other. And so I wish brands would start thinking like that, like saying, hey, listen, we're not going to be attractive to everybody. Like we're actually going to push away people that aren't what we're looking for. But the people that like vibe with us and are on our mission and love what we do and live what we live, those people are going to be glued to our brand. They're going to follow every new Instagram post. They're going to buy every product drop. I think brands just need to be a little bit more not dangerous. I think brands need to just be a little bit more willing to take risks and see and A/B test and be different, because that's what's going to win right now. Doing the same thing is not going to get you in front of customers.
Yeah, it's just a product of the ever-changing macro that we're in right now. Is you have to be different.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to go back to NFTs, but I want to quickly touch on that. I think the problem with NFTs, and now NFTs, I think, have been completely removed from vernacular.
Yeah,
We don't even mention the word
no,
NFT at all, just because I think people associate it with like gotchas or scams. But I think the premise of an NFT is there. I think it's the understanding that if you can take some sort of value digitally and wrap it in a way that can be owned and traded and shared and engaged with and moved around with your digital experience, I think that idea is amazing. I think the problem is when you give someone that canister of value, right? When there's nothing you can do with it, then what do you mean? Then it's not really a canister of value. It's a canister. It's like giving somebody an empty can of soda and saying, "Hey, thanks for signing up. Like, here's this cool can of soda that literally does nothing, means nothing, and goes nowhere." That was sort of the problem with 99% of what was happening
yeah.
with NFTs. So I'm excited to see as technology advances and as more people open up different ways to use these things, that's when I think it becomes a little bit more
So
exciting.
there's a really exciting project in Boston going on. It's been going on for I think like 8 years or something like that right now. It's called Interrupt is the company name, but Solid is the framework behind it. Founded by
Mm-hmm.
the Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that made um, like WWW. I don't know if you've heard of Solid or Interrupt yet.
What is
Like
www? That sounds like
.com.
the
Like
offshoot of the
no, just straight up
WWE.
like
Oh,
the internet. Yeah,
the
he made
internet.
the
He made the
internet.
internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
yeah, so he has a really exciting project going on with students at MIT, and it's been happening for a while now. Where I think it'll start gaining speed soon, where the value prop for the consumer isn't the fact that you get uh, isn't the fact that you get new customers that are completely free, like, and you get $5. The value prop for you as a consumer is complete ownership over your data. So if you want to subscribe
Mm,
to a brand, the idea in the future is that you use Solid's framework to ingest this pod. So I, as a customer, have my own living and breathing pod, and I can essentially append it to a brand's marketing list. And then the brand doesn't know who I am specifically, though they can send targeted emails and phone number, like SMS through it. And I could subtract or manually
mm-hmm.
add or, you know, detract information from my pod to be able to say, okay, I have 100 companies. These 100 companies don't have my data specifically, but they have my user pod. So they can send me this and I can
Yep.
configure this. And the idea is giving you complete control and access over what you're interested in. And um, I, I think it's a good variation or like try number two of Web3 as a whole, just because it's more focused on actual deliverables from user data, whereas before the focus was it was still very marketing heavy. It was hey,
Mm-hmm.
NFTs because you get a cool penguin and we get to email you. But now it's transforming into okay, I have complete control over my own data, and I'm going to know that this person can send me marketing materials, but that's not the same as them having direct control of my data. So we'll see if that
Mm-hmm.
starts changing and actually becoming more used and adopted. I think like an entire country has recently adopted their program. Like I forget which one. It
Yeah.
was one of the European forward technology companies or countries. I can't remember which one, but we'll see how it's going to be adopted in the future.
Yeah, I think that the benefit of that stuff is too the consumers are pushing for that sort of. I mean, Apple every year I feel like is making data harder to access for brands, and I think that trend is just going to continue. I mean, I don't see a world where we wake up tomorrow and they remove all the restrictions around how you manage data. I just see that getting more and more restrictive, and the end kind of state of that is customers controlling everything as in regards to their data. I think that's like this WWW project. I think requires a lot of I think it will require federal uh, influence to go as fast as it can initially. But I do see like long term that being definitely the future of customer data, the customer ownership of their data, and then eventually customer monetization of their data too. I think is there's some brands doing that where you can like pool your data and sell it, and now you're taking part in the actual what's already happening. You're just now getting a cut of it.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting. I think the biggest thing with new technology, especially when it comes to like Web3, what I've realized building in that space is there is such a divide already with brands, with regular people in technology, that when you introduce even more complexity, it's it's not going to work because brands today we're talking about all day, we're talking about brands that haven't even taken the first step to capture people in their store. So if they haven't taken the first step to capture people in their store, which is legitimately, I'm sure Swap QR is like the easiest thing ever to implement, why do we think that brands are going to want to go to step 9 of like having a fully decentralized ecosystem where people can move in and out and share, and it's super cool. I love talking about it. But the reality is consumers want value immediately. They want to have better experiences, better products. They want to have better everything. And if your technology is making a worse something but a better something else, it's not going to work, unfortunately. I wish it did work that way, but it doesn't.
yeah, and I think that's a big portion of what Swap does now, and like, you know, started. We have a very sophisticated mission if you want to go to that layer, but I keep going
Mm-hmm.
back to just give your customers a few bucks and some confetti, and there's going to be a very high chance that they subscribe and end up purchasing. Um, so like, why would you reinvent the wheel there? And maybe in the future, once that's implemented and that's everywhere, and because right now I think one of the biggest problems with brands too is that you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on out of home ads and events and whatever you do throughout the year, maybe even millions of dollars depending on how big your company is, tens of millions.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw this money into this black box because the only way of finding out if that was actually valuable is either following the software that sold you this product. So they're going to tell you, of course, it made you money
Mm-hmm.
because they looked at last week's purchases and then they looked at this week's purchases and there was a $5 spike and that was because their $5,000 spike and that was because of their out of home ad. But the reason why you had an out of home ad that week in Boston in the first place is because there was a Fenway game going on, like a few Red Sox games. So the influx of traffic might have actually just done that. It's really hard, or maybe you had a Facebook or Google ad running at the same time. Really hard to understand and differentiate the two right now. But if you had an actual revenue driver, like QR code that gives someone a few dollars, collect that first party data, and you're able to really closely analyze what happens with that customer and what their customer journey is from then onward, then you're able to really tailor that and deliver more value via your experiences. And it's simple.
Totally. We're coming up on We're coming up on time, Andrew. I always like to just leave with like one last question around, your advice. You work with amazing brands every single day, helping them to create more centers to collect customer data and create more engagement, not just online, but now in the store. So I'd love to just leave the audience with your biggest piece of recommendation for brands out there that listen to what you say today and they're like, Andrew, I'm ready to go. I want to start collecting more data. I want to become Starbucks, but apparel, whatever it might be. What advice do you
Yeah.
have for them?
I think the easiest and first step is always just starting with what are you going to give to your customers? Like, what are you giving back? And every first party data piece that you're collecting now isn't this first party data piece that you're purchasing or that you're, you know, essentially like leveraging off of somebody else's partnership. Like you'd already go online and buy 1,000,000 people and throw them in an email list and have a 0.002%
Hmm.
subscription rate and tanker deliverability scores. Like anyone can do that, but the more sophisticated way of garnishing better customers would be figuring out what your customers actually want, figuring out how to convert them, and then giving them that offer everywhere. And then if you give that offer everywhere, then you're able to, and data gate it, then you're able to create a sophisticated database that you can then push these offers to more frequently. So I would start at what your customers actually want and then meet them and give it to them.
I love that. I feel like too, I mean, we'll have to talk more offline, but I also feel like too, what you do is you help people get great customers. And I feel like that's so important because what we focus on is how do you take great customers and turn them into just super fans of what
Yeah.
you do? And I feel like it's so complementary because I feel like the biggest missing piece right now for a lot of brands is they're just trying to turn on the growth. They continue to step on the growth gas, dump more money here, push more money here, buy more, leads here, do more partnerships here. And the reality is like what you're saying is talk to your customers, find out why they came to you, find an offer that would make them super pumped, go out and get more customers just like them, and then continue to just build upon that. Make those offers more personalized, reach out on their birthday, like invest in what you have. And I think that's been where the brands have been crushing it today because they have customers that are not going anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. And that's definitely a partnership that I could see us having. Like, how do we create this supercharged tool for people to use and automatically understand and grow their customer base at a rate they've never been able to do before?
I love it. Well, Andrew, honestly, this has been awesome. I know for a fact there's going to be some people that really find this valuable. Where can people find you? Or maybe there's a brand today that's like, I need QR codes. Andrew has sold me. Where
Yeah.
do they go?
So Andrew at swaptqr.com. That's my email. You could throw that in the thing. Swaptqr.com is my link. Enter your email into the demo. We'll get back to you right away. Anything of that nature.
Awesome. Oh, and then also too, you guys don't just do QR codes. So I don't want to just pigeonhole you into that. A lot of different activation kind of technology.
Yeah, so we also do
as well. So I don't want to
we also
pigeonhole
do
you.
not NFT, NFC tags. So what those are, those tappers.
Similar but different.
Yeah, similar but very not similar. Yeah, essentially, what they let you do is we brand these tappers, so you get stickers. You get we have some brands that just buy thousands of stickers and just stick them throughout the city, and if you tap here, you get a reward. So, yeah,
cool.
Those are cool.
Love that. All right, Andrew, let you go. Thanks for sticking around a little bit longer, and yeah, excited to see what Swapt does, and I'm sure we're going to cross paths. So
yeah,
appreciate
thanks
your
for
time,
having me, Jared. See you later.